Here's a more natural, human-sounding rewrite that keeps all the important details while improving the flow and removing repetition. My family wanted me to move my wedding because it conflicted with my sister's girls' trip. I refused. They boycotted the wedding, and my wife and I got married without them. But that was only the beginning. When our wedding photos went viral online, my family's reaction made everything even worse. I'm Ryan, 30, and I work as a project coordinator for a construction company. I have a stable job and usually avoid conflict. In my family, I'm the quiet one who keeps the peace whenever possible. My wife, Nora, is 29, and we've been together for 6 years before getting engaged. We'd talked about marriage for a long time, so the proposal wasn't a surprise. I proposed at a small park near our home, and we both got emotional when she said yes. Afterward, we shared the news with our families. To understand what happened, you need to know my family. My mom, Diane, is the one everyone listens to without question. She rarely raises her voice, but somehow everything revolves around her. My dad, Paul, avoids confrontation at all costs. My younger sister, Talia, 26, has always been treated like the center of attention. My older brother, Gabe, 34, is already married and prefers staying neutral, even if that means letting mom have her way. Favoritism has always been obvious. A couple of years ago, I got promoted at work and invited my family out to celebrate. Everyone agreed to come until Talia called that afternoon, saying she already had plans with her friends and wanted the family to join her instead. My parents immediately canceled on me with a simple text saying, "Sorry, your sister needs us." Gabe canceled too. In the end, Nora and I celebrated with her parents, and my family never even asked how my promotion dinner went. When we announced our engagement, everyone's reactions seemed positive. Mom asked the usual wedding questions. Dad said he was proud. Talia immediately started talking about the wedding, and Gabe texted that he was looking forward to it. Nora's family was incredibly supportive from the start. Her mom offered to help with planning. Her dad insisted we shouldn't worry about money, and everyone was genuinely excited for us. Since we both had busy schedules, Nora and I chose a wedding date that fit our lives instead of waiting. It wasn't symbolic or random. It was simply the date that made the most sense before work and family commitments complicated things. We started planning right away, beginning with a guest list. Nora's side was easy because she's close with her relatives. Mine took longer because there were family members I barely spoke to anymore, but we still try to be fair. Nora's family jumped in to help immediately. Her mom shared catering ideas and offered to make calls. Her dad volunteered to cover part of the budget without making us uncomfortable, and her brother offered to help with the setup. Their support felt genuine rather than overwhelming. My family also seemed supportive at first. Mom asked about the wedding colors and overall style. Dad joked about giving a speech. Talia kept sending outfit ideas for herself, and Gabe asked about the venue and schedule. For a while, I honestly believed everything was going to be easy. The one person who's always been in my corner is my grandfather, Walter, my dad's father. He's in his late 70s, blunt, stubborn, and the only member of my family who's consistently supported me. Whenever my parents missed my school events because they were focused on Talia, Grandpa Walter was there. He sat in the front row at my college graduation and still calls me regularly just to see how I'm doing. When I told him I was engaged, he smiled and said, "Good. Don't let anyone mess with your plans." That was his way of congratulating me and warning me because he knew exactly how my family could be. A few weeks into planning, my mom called. She sounded completely casual, as if it wasn't a big deal. So she said about that wedding date, "I'm not sure it works for everyone. If you'd like, I can also make it 40% shorter while keeping every key plot point intact." When my mom brought up the wedding date, I asked what she meant. She stayed vague, saying only that some people might have scheduling conflicts. I assumed she was talking about work or something unavoidable, so I didn't think much of it. I told her we'd already started planning and had given everyone plenty of notice. She simply said, "Okay," but something about her tone felt off, like she was planting the idea that the date would become an issue. After the call, I tried to brush it aside, even though I had a bad feeling. Nora asked what Mom wanted, and I told her it was probably nothing. At least, that's what I believed at the time. A few days later, Talia came over wearing workout clothes with sunglasses on her head, looking like she'd just come from brunch. The moment she sat down, though, she got serious. "Ryan," she said, "your wedding is during my girl's trip." She explained that she and her friends took the trip every year around the same time and that everyone had already requested time off work. I honestly hadn't known about this tradition when Nora and I picked our date. We chose the weekend that worked best for us and announced it early so everyone would have plenty of notice. Then she said, "I don't want to have to choose." Nora was sitting beside me, silently staring at her. I asked the obvious question, "Can't you just move the trip?" I wasn't angry yet. I was genuinely confused. It was a vacation. Weddings aren't easy to reschedule, but a trip usually is. Talia acted like I was asking her to cancel something life-changing. She said it wasn't fair, that I was putting her in an impossible position, and that family should matter more than a date we'd picked. The way she said it made our wedding sound like some casual gathering that could be moved whenever it became inconvenient for her. I looked at her and said, "I want you there, but if it comes down to choosing, I'd expect my sister to be at my wedding." She gave me a tight smile, muttered, "Wow, okay," and walked out. She slammed the screen door so hard that Nora jumped. Later that evening, Nora looked at me and said, "She really thinks you're supposed to move your wedding because of her vacation." I didn't even know how to respond. Saying it out loud made it sound ridiculous. Not long after that, Gabe called. He got straight to the point. "I just realized your wedding falls on the same weekend as our company retreat." His voice had that careful, professional tone, like he was trying to negotiate a business deal. He explained that the retreat happened every year. His boss expected him there, and missing it wouldn't look good for his career. I asked if he could skip it just this once. He never gave me a direct answer. Instead, he kept repeating that it was a difficult decision and asked whether our wedding date was completely fixed. It was the same attitude Talia had, just expressed more politely. Both of them were acting as though my wedding was optional if something more convenient came along. Nora and I couldn't believe it. Nobody was dealing with an emergency. No one was sick. There wasn't a family crisis. One conflict was a vacation, and the other was a work retreat. The next day, Mom called again, and this time she stopped being vague. She said Talia was really upset and asked if I could work with her. I told her the date wasn't changing. We planned everything early specifically so people could arrange their schedules. Mom sighed as if I was being unreasonable. She said Talia shouldn't have to miss something that was important to her, almost as though my own wedding wasn't just as important. She kept repeating the word compromise. "Pick another weekend," she said. "Make it easier for the family." She framed the whole situation as if I was refusing to meet everyone halfway, even though her version of compromise meant moving our entire wedding. I reminded her that we'd already started planning and had good reasons for choosing that date. She called me stubborn and accused me of only thinking about myself. By the time the conversation ended, it was obvious she'd already decided I was the one causing the problem. She wasn't trying to understand my side. She was trying to convince me to accept hers. After I hung up, Nora shook her head and said, "Your mom is acting like you're the one hurting the family, when it's really the other way around." This version keeps every key event while making the narration smoother, more conversational, and easier to read. Nora was right. I could already see the story being twisted before everything had even unfolded. A few days later, I found out Talia had gone to Grandpa Walter, hoping he'd take her side and convince me to move the wedding. Instead, he calmly told her, "You're choosing a vacation over your brother's wedding, then trying to make him feel guilty about it. That's wrong." He didn't raise his voice or give a long lecture. He simply told the truth. Talia stormed out. Not long afterward, she started telling people that Grandpa Walter was being mean and playing favorites. The funny part is that Walter doesn't coddle anyone. He just says what he believes is true, whether people like hearing it or not. That was the moment I realized this was no longer about scheduling. If someone genuinely couldn't make it, I would have understood. People miss weddings for all kinds of reasons. But my family wasn't just saying they couldn't come. They were trying to pressure me into changing everything. And when I refused, they acted as if I was the one hurting them. So I called Mom back and said, "The date is final. Gabe and Talia can come if they want, but we're done arguing about it." She went quiet before coldly replying, "Fine, do what you want." From that point on, the tension became very real. Instead of settling down, everything escalated. Talia started sending me nonstop text messages, acting like I'd ruined her entire year. "I can't believe you're doing this. Everyone already made plans. You're making me choose between my brother and my friends." Then she'd add things like, "I thought you cared about me," or "You're putting me last again." If I didn't respond within an hour, another message would appear. She stopped directly asking me to move the wedding, but every message carried the same expectation. Nora watched the notifications pile up and asked if she should reply for me. I told her no. I didn't want Mom turning it into, "Your fiancé is controlling you." I wanted to keep the conflict between me and my family, even though it was affecting both of us. Mom's messages were shorter, but much colder. At first, she kept saying, "Family comes first." Then it became, "I raised you better than this." She accused me of embarrassing her, claimed people were talking about us, and insisted I was forcing her to choose between her children. Dad stayed exactly the way he always had, silent. Whenever I tried talking to him, he'd simply say, "Your mom is upset," or "You know how Talia gets." It was as if their emotions had somehow become my responsibility, while my wedding was treated as the problem. After telling me about his company retreat, Gabe practically disappeared. I'd send simple questions like, "Are you bringing your partner?" or "Do you need the hotel information?" He'd read the messages and never answer. There was no argument, no explanation, just silence. Then I found out my parents had hosted a family dinner. I wasn't invited. My cousin Farah told me afterward because she thought I deserved to know. She said everyone was told it was just a normal family gathering, but once everyone sat down, Mom and Talia started telling their version of the story. Mom described me as stubborn and unreasonable, saying I refused to compromise. Talia claimed I'd chosen the wedding date specifically to interfere with her annual trip and even told people she'd never really mattered to me. They also talked about Nora as if she'd completely changed who I was. Some relatives quietly agreed, mostly to avoid conflict. Grandpa Walter was there too. Farah said he listened patiently before setting down his fork and saying, "No, that's not what happened." Ryan gave everyone plenty of notice. "You're twisting the story." He wasn't angry, just honest. The entire table fell silent. Mom quickly changed the subject, and no one challenged Grandpa. After dinner, Farah said Mom looked furious, though she hid it behind her usual calm expression. A little while later, my cousin Zane called with even more information. Mom wasn't just complaining anymore. She was quietly trying to sabotage the wedding. She told some relatives, "Don't go. This whole thing is a mess." To others, she said, "Go if you want, but don't post any pictures." According to Zane, she even warned one of my aunts, "If you attend, just know you're choosing a side." It became obvious she wanted the wedding to look small and unsuccessful, whether people attended or not. Around the same time, Dad suddenly backed out of helping financially. My parents had originally offered to contribute toward the catering, but then Dad called and said they needed to reconsider because things are tense. This version keeps all the original plot points and dialogue, while making the narration feel more natural, conversational, and engaging. It felt like a quiet punishment. My parents pulled back their support to make a point. We had to rearrange a few payments and delay one of the vendor deposits until my next paycheck. I never asked Grandpa Walter for help, but somehow he found out. He called and asked what we still had left to pay. I told him we'd manage. He simply said, "Tell me the amount." 2 days later, he showed up at our house with an envelope. "This is for the photographer," he said. "Your wedding photos shouldn't suffer because other people want to act stupid." There was no lecture, no guilt, and no expectation of being paid back. He just wanted to help. Before he left, he asked how Nora was doing and reminded me to make sure she was eating and getting enough rest. We kept moving forward. The guest list was finalized, the invitations were printed, and we mailed them out. I still invited Mom, Dad, Talia, and Gabe. I didn't want anyone saying we'd excluded them. If they wanted to come, they were welcome to attend like adults. Talia and Gabe both sent back firm no RSVPs. No phone call. No explanation. Just a checkbox. Talia didn't even leave a note in the comment section. Gabe's response hurt even more because he hadn't spoken to me since that first conversation about his work retreat. Mom and Dad didn't RSVP at all. Weeks passed. I finally asked once. Mom only replied, "We'll see." Dad said, "Your mom is still hurt." It became obvious they were waiting me out, hoping I'd panic and move the wedding just to get them to say yes. Nora and I decided to plan as though they weren't coming. Not out of spite, but because that's exactly what their actions suggested. Instead, we focused on the people who were genuinely happy for us, mostly Nora's family and the few cousins who stayed out of Mom's orbit. Near the end of that week, Grandpa Walter called. "Don't let them wear you down," he said. "I'll be there." It was the only promise from my side of the family that felt completely dependable. By then, everything was clear. My family wanted control. I wasn't giving it to them. A week before the wedding, everything finally came together. The venue was ready, our outfits had been picked up, and the final payments were made. Nora's parents even had the entire wedding schedule written out on a whiteboard in their kitchen. For the first time in months, I honestly thought we might make it through the final week without any more drama. Then late that night, my cousin Farah called. "Don't panic," she said, "but Grandpa Walter is in the hospital." He had collapsed in his kitchen. The doctors later explained it was a bad reaction to a new medication, not a heart attack, but all I heard at first was hospital. I grabbed my jacket and drove there immediately. By the time I arrived, he was stable. He looked tired, but he was awake, alert, and even joking with the nurses. The doctor said he only needed to stay overnight for observation. They would adjust his medication, and once he was discharged, light activity would be perfectly fine. About 30 minutes later, Mom and Dad arrived. The first thing Mom said to me was, "This stress is doing this to him, Ryan. Just move the wedding." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. She was acting as though my wedding had caused his hospitalization. "Mom," I said, "the doctor literally said it was his medication." She ignored me. "He's been worrying about you and this whole wedding situation," she insisted. "He's old, Ryan. Do you really want to risk his health because you're being stubborn?" Grandpa Walter slowly lifted his head from the pillow. "Diane, stop." His voice wasn't loud, but the entire room fell silent. He pointed at me and said, "Don't you dare change your wedding over this nonsense." Then he leaned back, closed his eyes, and made it clear the conversation was over. Mom didn't say another word. She quietly left the room. The next day, Grandpa was already feeling much better and joking again. Before I left, he looked at me and said, "They'll use anything they can. Don't let them take this away from you." The rest of the week flew by. Nora's parents handled the last-minute details while I checked in with the relatives who were still coming. That list wasn't very long. Aunt Marisol, a couple of cousins, and my mom's quieter sister, Aunt Jocelyn. Most of my family either stayed silent or politely declined. On the morning of the wedding, I woke up half expecting one last message from Mom. Instead, I got a text from my cousin Zane. "Just so you know, your parents, Talia, and Gabe aren't coming. They've been telling people it would be too uncomfortable." I looked at the message for a moment, then put my phone away. I wasn't going to let them take over our wedding day. When we arrived at the venue, the weather was perfect. Soft music played in the background, everyone was smiling, and the atmosphere felt peaceful. Nora's family greeted guests, checked the tables, adjusted the flowers, and made sure everything ran smoothly. The cousins who came hugged me like they were making up for everyone who chose not to be there. Then I saw Grandpa Walter. Only a week after leaving the hospital, he was slowly walking across the parking lot with his cane. I told him he didn't have to come. He waved the idea away. "My doctor cleared me," he said. "I just have to bring the cane and not try to be a hero. If you continue the story, I can keep the same tone and style consistently throughout." Grandpa Walter looked at me and said, "I missed one wedding in my life, and I've regretted it for 40 years. I'm not missing yours." When the ceremony began, the empty seats in the front row were impossible to ignore. For chairs sat empty, where my mom, Dad, Talia, and Gabe should have been. I tried not to look, but my eyes kept drifting toward them. It hurt more than I expected. Then Nora appeared at the end of the aisle, walking beside her father. She looked calm, confident, and beautiful. The moment I saw her, the ache started to fade. We exchanged our vows. Grandpa Walter smiled through the ceremony. Nora's family cheered us on with so much warmth that the room felt full of love. When the officiant pronounced us husband and wife, everyone erupted into applause. There was nothing awkward or uncomfortable about it. The room felt alive. Those empty chairs didn't define the day. The reception was even better than I expected. Nora's parents kept the celebration going, her cousins helped serve the cake, and Aunt Marisol walked around taking photos of everything. Nora laughing, Grandpa Walter dancing carefully with his cane, and my cousins clapping during the toasts. At one point she smiled and said, "I'm sending these to the relatives who stayed home so they can see what they missed." Halfway through dinner, my cousin Zane handed me an envelope. Inside was a check and a handwritten note from my mom. It simply read, "Asterisk, we hope you learn the value of family someday." Asterisk, there was no congratulations, no expression of love, no mom and dad, just another quiet jab written in careful handwriting. I folded the note, slipped it into my jacket, and didn't say anything. Nora noticed the look on my face. "What is it?" she asked. "Nothing important," I replied. When it was time for our first dance, I looked around the room. It wasn't the wedding I'd imagined years ago, but it was full of people who had chosen to be there. That mattered far more than the people who had chosen not to. At the end of the night, Grandpa Walter pulled me aside. "You did good," he said. "You married someone solid. Don't let all this noise follow you." I nodded, trying to hold on to that moment. The music fading into the background, his hand on my shoulder, and the sense of peace that had finally settled over everything. The next morning, Nora and I quietly packed our bags. We didn't tell anyone where we were going. We didn't post anything online. We simply left for our honeymoon. For the first time in months, life felt peaceful. The silence lasted for 3 days. On the fourth morning, I finally turned my phone back on. It exploded with notifications, missed calls, family group chat messages, texts from cousins I hadn't heard from in months. The first thing I saw was a Facebook post from Aunt Marisol. She had uploaded several wedding photos. Nora and me walking back down the aisle together, Grandpa Walter smiling proudly from the front row, and Nora's father giving his toast. Her caption simply said, "Asterisk, some people miss something they can never get back." Asterisk, the photos spread quickly. Someone shared them into one of our hometown Facebook groups, and from there, they took off. The comment section quickly turned into a discussion about my family. People who had known us for years started pointing out the favoritism they'd seen for decades. Some commented, "Not surprised. Diana's always treated Talia like the favorite." Others wrote, "Paul never stands up for anything." People even brought up old memories, my birthdays, my college graduation, and the promotion dinner my family skipped because of Talia. Everything that had always stayed behind closed doors was suddenly being discussed in public. Then my cousin Farah posted a short video from the reception. It showed Nora and me sharing our first dance, smiling and laughing together. Her caption was simple, "Asterisk, love wins." Asterisk, the video spread just as fast. People kept sharing it with comments like, "This is what family should celebrate," and "Good for him for living his life." I didn't see any of it until later because my phone had stayed off until the fourth morning. According to my cousins, that was what finally pushed Mom over the edge. Within hours, she started commenting under relatives' posts. "You don't know the whole story. We made our choices for a reason." Whenever people asked what she meant, she became defensive instead of explaining. Eventually, she posted a long Facebook status saying, "Asterisk, sometimes family has to protect their peace." Even when outsiders twist the truth, people love pretending to be martyrs online. Asterisk, it didn't get the response she expected. People weren't buying it anymore. That same evening, the family group chat exploded. Mom was furious that Aunt Marisol had shared the wedding photos and that Farah had posted the dance video. She called them disrespectful and accused them of trying to humiliate her. Talia joined in, claiming everyone was feeding into Ryan's victim story. She even accused me of manipulating people with the wedding photos, as though I'd somehow staged my own wedding just to make them look bad. This time, though, several of my cousins finally pushed back. One of my cousins replied, "He invited you. You chose not to come. That's not manipulation." Another added, "You skipped your own son's wedding, and now you're mad because everyone else had a good time." That was enough for Mom. She started removing people from the family group chat. Anyone who disagreed with her was kicked out. I never responded. I just sat there scrolling through the screenshots people kept sending me. Nora looked over and quietly said, "They're burning their own house down." Later that day, I got a message from Sienna, Gabe's partner. She apologized for reaching out, but said she couldn't stay silent anymore. According to her, Gabe had actually wanted to come to the wedding. He planned on being there until Mom and Talia started calling him every single day. They guilt him non-stop, telling him that if he supported me, he was betraying the family. Sienna said Gabe finally gave in because he couldn't handle the pressure anymore. She also told me Mom had gone as far as saying, "If he's not loyal to us, then he's no son of mine." Eventually, Gabe broke down and decided to attend the company retreat instead. Sienna said she regretted letting him give in and wanted me to know he hadn't stayed away because he hated me. I thank her for being honest. I didn't blame her. Honestly, I didn't even blame Gabe completely. More than anything, I just felt exhausted. While all of that was happening online, Grandpa Walter decided to deal with things face to face. He showed up at my parents' house without warning. My cousin Farah's brother, Zane, happened to be there dropping something off and later told me everything that happened. Grandpa walked in, sat down at the kitchen table, and asked Dad to sit across from him. Mom tried to stay involved, but Grandpa looked at her and calmly said, "I'm talking to my son." Then he turned to Dad. He told him he'd stayed silent for far too long. One by one, he brought up moments from years ago. "Do you remember leaving Ryan's college graduation early so you could go to Talia's party? Do you remember skipping his promotion dinner because Talia was upset over a breakup? You've spent decades choosing one child's feelings over another child's life." Dad didn't interrupt. He just listened. Grandpa continued, "This wedding wasn't caused by one argument. It's the result of years of imbalance." Then he said something that stuck with me. "You failed him when he was a boy, and you failed him again as a man. You think staying silent keeps the peace, but all it taught everyone was that you could be pushed around." According to Zane, Dad sat there with his face buried in his hands. Mom tried to interrupt once. "That's not fair, Walter." Without missing a beat, Grandpa replied, "Fair would have been showing up for your son." When he got up to leave, he looked at both of them and said, "If you can't fix this, at least stop lying about it." Later that night, my phone rang. It was Dad. He was crying before he even managed to speak. "Grandpa came over," he finally said. "He told me everything I should have admitted years ago." His voice cracked. "I'm ashamed, Ryan. I failed you. I didn't know what to say, so I just let him talk." Then he told me something I never expected to hear. He said he'd finally told Mom that if she didn't apologize and stop all of this, he'd file for divorce. He couldn't live with himself anymore unless he tried to make things right. It was the bravest thing I'd ever heard him say. But saying something brave and actually following through are two different things, especially for someone who has spent his entire life avoiding conflict. I sat alone on our hotel balcony, holding the phone to my ear while my father broke down for the first time I'd ever heard. He kept repeating the same things. "I wish I'd stood up for you. I wish I'd gone to your wedding. I wish I'd been stronger." When the call ended, I stared at my phone for a long time. Nora stepped onto the balcony. "Who was that?" she asked. "My dad." "What did he say?" "He finally cracked." She was quiet for a moment before asking, "Do you believe him?" I didn't answer. Part of me wanted to, but I'd spent too many years watching him apologize without ever changing anything. For now, I was simply surprised that he'd finally spoken the truth out loud. I just wasn't ready to believe it would last. Over the next few months, everything became quiet. No family group chats. No guilt-filled messages. No sudden crisis. Just silence. For the first time in years, my phone wasn't lighting up every other day because of another family problem. Nora and I settled back into normal life. We went to work, worked on the house, had quiet dinners with friends, and enjoyed being newly married. Grandpa Walter still called every now and then, but never to talk about the drama. He'd simply ask how we were doing. Then, out of nowhere, Mom started texting again. At first, the messages seemed harmless. "How's work? How's Nora? I watched a movie today that reminded me of you." The guilt and pressure were gone, at least on the surface. She acted as if nothing had happened, as though the wedding and everything surrounding it had simply disappeared. I replied with a few short answers at first. Then I stopped responding altogether. Eventually, she sent another message. We all said things we didn't mean. It's time to move forward. I didn't reply. There was still no apology. Saying we all said things was just another way of turning deliberate choices into a simple misunderstanding. A few weeks later, my cousin Farah called. She sounded hesitant. A few weeks later, my cousin Farah called. So, Talia is getting married. Oh, was all I could say. She'd gotten engaged months earlier, but had kept it quiet to avoid more family drama. According to Farah, Mom was fully involved in planning the wedding, acting as though everything in the family had been repaired. It was going to be a big local ceremony with plenty of relatives. Nora overheard the conversation and asked, "Do you think she'll invite us?" "She shouldn't," I replied. "But she will." 2 days later, a plain white envelope arrived in the mail. Inside was a standard wedding invitation. There was no handwritten note, no acknowledgement of everything that had happened. Just the date, the time, and the words, Mr. and Mrs. Paul and Diane invite you to the wedding of their daughter, Talia. It felt like they were daring us to pretend none of it had ever happened. Nora read it and shook her head. They really expect us to show up like nothing happened. The next day, Talia messaged me. There wasn't even a hello. She wrote, "I know things got messy, but I'm willing to forgive you if you come to the wedding. It's time to move past everything." Nora rolled her eyes. "Are you going to answer?" "Yeah," I said, "but not seriously." I typed, "Sorry, we can't make it. Nora has an appointment to get her nails done that weekend." Then I hit send. It mirrored the excuse she'd once used with me. Casual, self-centered, dismissive. It made the point without starting another argument. Her priorities hadn't mattered when it came to my wedding, and hers didn't matter to me anymore. She read the message immediately. Then, nothing. A few hours later, Mom texted me. She was furious. She called me cruel and immature and accused me of making the family look bad. I didn't respond. That evening, the real flood of messages began. My phone wouldn't stop buzzing. Mom's sisters, Aunt Rita and Aunt Jocelyn, both reached out. Even Aunt Jocelyn, who had actually attended my wedding, now sounded just like Rita. The messages came one after another. "You're breaking your mother's heart. You're punishing her over one mistake. Families fight, Ryan, but you can't carry this forever." Not one of them mentioned what had actually happened. When I didn't answer, they switched to guilt. "Your mom isn't sleeping. She cries every day. Be the bigger person." Nora told me to block everyone. Instead, I muted the conversations. Meanwhile, the family had split into two camps. Some cousins thought I should go just to keep the peace. Others said I had every right to stay away. Aunt Marisol defended me under one of Talia's social media posts. "He invited all of you to his wedding." Funny how everyone seems to forget that now. Mom deleted the comment within an hour. Nora's parents stayed exactly the same as they always had. Her mom told me, "Let them tell whatever story they want. You already know the truth." Her dad added, "If she's saying she's willing to forgive you, she still believes she's the victim. You can't win with people who think like that." Instead of spending the wedding weekend stressed, Nora booked us a small cabin a couple of hours away. When the day arrived, we packed our bags, turned off our phones, and left early. The drive was peaceful. Trees lined the highway. The roads were quiet. Nora softly sang along with the radio. We stopped at a little diner where nobody knew who we were. For the first time in a long while, all the family drama felt far away. That evening, as we sat outside watching the sky grow darker, Nora smiled and said, "You know, they're probably talking about you right now." I laughed. "Yeah, but at least I don't have to hear it." We came home 2 days later. As expected, my phone was full of messages. Mom wrote, "You should be ashamed." She said Talia had cried when she realized we weren't coming. Aunt Rita messaged, "You've made your point. Enough." Dad simply wrote, "Wish you'd come." I answered none of them. About a week later, Farah called again. She sounded equal parts amused and exhausted. "You missed quite a show," she said. Apparently, the wedding had been tense. Mom kept bringing me up in conversations, telling people I was still holding on to old grudges. During her reception speech, Talia even mentioned me. She said she wished everyone could let go of the past. According to Farah, the room became noticeably uncomfortable. Several guests left early. When I told Nora, she laughed. Of course, she turned your absence into part of her speech. That was the moment I realized something had changed. I wasn't angry anymore. I was finished. I didn't want revenge. I wasn't waiting for apologies. I wasn't hoping anyone would suddenly understand. I was simply done. The following weekend, Nora and I printed a few of our favorite wedding photos and hung them in the hallway. Every picture showed real smiles and people who had chosen to be there. No guilt, no pretending, no fake apologies attached. Talia's wedding became another family story that eventually faded away. Instead of feeling guilty, I felt relieved. The next 2 years passed quietly. Nora and I moved, started new jobs, and built a peaceful life that didn't revolve around family drama. Every now and then I'd hear updates through my cousins. About a year and a half after her wedding, Talia's marriage fell apart. The details depended on who was telling the story. Some people said her husband left. Others claimed she pushed him away. Either way, the outcome was the same. They divorced before reaching their second anniversary. I didn't celebrate it, but I won't pretend it didn't feel strange hearing that she was finally facing something real, something she couldn't explain away or blame on someone else. Mom reacted exactly the way I expected. She filled social media with long posts about how Talia had given everything to someone who didn't deserve her. Once again, she painted her as the perfect victim. There was no mention of Talia's mistakes, no self-reflection, just another version of the same story. Asterisk, my poor daughter. Asterisk, mom kept posting about Talia online, calling her my poor daughter and sharing vague, inspirational quotes about strength and betrayal. Dad stayed mostly quiet through all of it. Despite telling me he'd divorce mom if she didn't change, he never actually did. But something in him shifted. He stopped joining in on mom's public drama. Every now and then, he'd quietly like one of my social media posts, a photo of Nora and me at the park, or was something equally ordinary. He never commented. He never reached out. It felt like he was trying to show support without directly standing up to mom. By then, though, the damage had already been done. One afternoon, I got a text from Gabe. Asterisk, can we meet? Asterisk, we met at a small diner halfway between our houses. At first, we just talked over coffee about everyday things. Then he looked at me and said, I should have stood up for you. You didn't deserve the way everyone treated you. He admitted he'd finally realized how toxic mom and Talia had become. He told me the company retreat had never been worth losing his relationship with his brother. Sienna had apparently been encouraging him for months to make things right. He didn't defend anyone. He didn't make excuses. He simply said, I messed up. It didn't erase everything that had happened, but it was the first genuine apology I'd received from anyone in my family. I thanked him, and for the first time, I truly meant it. After breakfast, we paid the bill. Before we walked away, Gabe looked at me and said, You deserve peace, man. That was the last thing he said before we left, and those words stayed with me. Not long afterward, Nora and I found out we were expecting a baby. We didn't announce it online. Instead, we shared the news only with the people who had consistently been there for us. Grandpa Walter, Nora's parents, and a few close friends. Everyone else could find out whenever they happened to hear about it. About 2 weeks later, Mom learned through an extended cousin. She texted me. The message started politely enough before quickly turning into guilt. I hope you don't punish your child the way you punish your family. You could have told me first, but I guess I don't matter anymore. I didn't respond. Nora read the message once and simply said, block her. So I did. We blocked Talia too, just in case she decided to start the same cycle all over again. That night, I told Grandpa Walter what had happened. He nodded and said, You can't build a new family if you keep the old noise inside your walls. That was all I needed to hear. When our baby arrived, everything changed. But this time, it changed for the better. Our home was full, but peaceful. There was laughter, home-cooked meals, quiet nights with a newborn. 3 days after we brought our son home from the hospital, Grandpa Walter stopped by carrying a small package wrapped in plain brown paper. Inside was a soft blue blanket and a little wooden toy truck. These were yours, he said. You used to drag that truck everywhere. He held his great-grandson for a long moment before looking at me. This little boy doesn't need noise, he said. He just needs love. Months went by, and life stayed peaceful. Every now and then, I'd come across one of Mom's social media posts through mutual friends. They were always the same, vague, self-pitying messages trying to make her side of the stories sound tragic. I never opened them. Then one evening, I received a text from a number I didn't recognize. It was only one sentence. Asterisk, congratulations. Can I meet my niece or nephew? Asterisk, there was no profile picture, but I recognized the writing immediately. It was Talia. After 2 years of silence, that was all she had to say. No epaligi. No asking how I was.